Good evening, everybody. My name is Dipankar Kasnabish. I'm here to anchor a session with a topic which is close to everybody's mind today, COVID. What's happening in COVID, specifically in the context of the communities which you live in. Today, as a guest speaker, we have Dr. Gautam Melur Sukumar, who is from NIMHANS. As you know, this is being organized by Force GW, which is an organization of resident welfare associations, communities, and establishments in the greater Whitefield area. This organization works with every stakeholder, including the communities, the government, the bureaucracy, the civic society leaders to resolve the problems in this area through a collaborative method. Before we hand it over to Dr. Gautam, I will take a minute or two to introduce introduce him. If you see his profile, which I have projected on the screen, Dr. Gautam is MBBS and MD in community medicine and associate professor in the Department of Epidemiology at NIMHANS. He specialized in the field of community medicine, public health, and epidemiology. He has implemented projects funded by WHO, WHO Southeast Asia Office, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, Government of India, Government of Karnataka, and he has been working on these for over a decade now. He is an active researcher in the area of environmental health, infectious disease, occupational health, non-communicable disease, and injury epidemiology. And currently involved in developing a model for understanding COVID-19 from the apartment perspective, the risk of apartments from the perspective of this disease. He is an active publisher, has 25 research papers in index national international journals and 25 research reports in the field of public health. Now, just one quick point. I wanted to mention that epidemiology, though it rhymes with epidemic, and we may feel that this is actually the study of that field. Yes, it is correct, but epidemiology is a much broader subject, which includes epidemic, pandemic, essentially studies the disease and disease patterns of population at large, including developing models of how to identify them, how to treat them, and how to eliminate them. And injury epidemiology, essentially, again on the same lines, is how to avoid injured at a community level, like traffic accidents or accidents that may happen because of negligence of in multiple homes, like LPG accidents. So that is what his area. Doctor, before we start, there are many questions in the people's mind. I, however, wanted to summarize them broadly on 4 buckets. So if I may list the questions, the first question people want to know is, the answer is, what should we do? Given that given that cases are going up every day, where is the end? When do we see the peak, and when it will come down? And what do we do in the process? We are already doing the basics, but can you do something more? The other question is, there's so much of fear, there's a panic. So can we avoid, can we minimize, and can we stop ostracizing or at times accusing people who are affected, and how do we help them better? The last question possibly is, when are we going to get a drug, a treatment and a vaccine? Because we hear multiple timelines, but there is no clarity. So with this, I hand it over to Dr. Gautam. Dr. Gautam, you may start. Thank you.
As of today, I would say it is successful because now we are looking at somewhere around 8 to 10 lakh infections. So we have brought it down by 90%. But what we should understand that within the major epidemic in the country, there are minor epidemics at different points and different places. So it will not happen at the same rate throughout the country. Some places will have more, some places will have less. So wherever there are cases, Now the strategy is wherever there are cases, contain it. Identify, contain. And the only way to do this is having a good surveillance system. So cases will steadily increase. When it will end? It will end only when the virus is finding it difficult to latch on to another person. Now you can ask me does that mean that millions of people should get infected? No. I am trying to say that the virus should find it difficult to get one more susceptible person. So let us say I am not yet infected. I am susceptible. But if I'm wearing a mask and talking to a person who is infected from a safe distance, even though I'm susceptible, I will not get infection. So the virus will continue to hover around in the environment. It will die by itself. So it will end when it will find it difficult to survive in the environment, and it will no longer find it difficult to find another susceptible person. That when will this will end? As per the discussions of experts and our modeling, state government modeling, everything, we are in the peak. We are more or less in the upper part of the peak we are going now. So after we reach there, there will be some smaller peaks and it will start coming down. And most of our colleagues and other experts opine that this would be somewhere by around August first week or July end, where we are going to see a large number of cases. After that, it will start decreasing. And if it continues in the same rate as it is going and people improve their behavioral practices, at least if they maintain it exactly the way they are doing it now, it could probably simmer down by September end or October first week. So, but I cannot say for sure that it will certainly happen, because people's behavior is dynamic, and the virus, let me tell you, is also dynamic. It is undergoing mutation for its own survival. So what we can do as citizens, we should continue to do whatever we are doing now. That is, everyone tries to protect each other. Everybody respects other person's practices for preventing himself or herself from getting infected. And we all should strictly adhere to personal protection practices. So this is, okay, maybe each question we can have a discussion. We can listen to what people want to ask. Can we go ahead in that way, or should I go on answering every question? Dipankar ji?
Yeah, so Doctor, I think you can give a brief overview, as you have already probably covered first two.
Okay. Yeah, we can do. Yeah. So what we can do as a citizen, we'll have to comply with all the government guidelines or whatever the advisories that are issued in our apartments. What are the advisories issued by RWS, which further take the help of experts and BBMP? We should comply. That's the most important thing. Second thing is we must establish a very good surveillance system, because the only strategy that is present now, because we are all facing an epidemic, probably for the first time, of a disease for which there is no cure or there is no vaccine. We have to live to tell this story to others. So what we can do as a citizen is we'll have to comply. Second, we will have to establish good surveillance systems. May not be a mobile-based surveillance systems. It could be anything. Surveillance system is nothing but to identify where the risk is higher and contain it. So identify risk spots, contain it. Identify, because you should understand, if the virus is here, around that if you put a ring, it will be contained there. So it will not go beyond that. And it can, and the lifespan of the virus is not so much. Maximum 2 to 3 weeks, it will die out. So along with, as the virus goes away, the only way virus can come here is somebody else has to bring it from here. So surveillance is the only thing that will save us now. Steps to decrease panic. See, I would say that now a panic is an individual attribute, but however, mob behavior fuels panic. Media adds fire to this. Awareness is important. What we need to show is that I personally feel there is no need to be panic. We should be cautious. We are doing really well compared to many other countries. The awareness level, I feel, coupled with the media bombardment, social media and everything, has created, to some extent, has contributed to this panic. Initially, I felt this was useful because of panic, people were compliant. But now, this panic If it remains at that level of compliance, it's good. It shouldn't go into the level of stigmatizing people who are affected, stigmatizing people who are working in healthcare, stigmatizing people who are working in police and those kind of things. So what we should do to decrease panic, we must first remember or put into our minds that this is a normal viral disease like any other respiratory infection. More than 90% of the cases are mild. You will just have some mild hoarseness of the throat, a sort of feeling of flu, of fever, sometimes without symptoms, and it will go and go on its own. It's only a very small percentage, 3 to 5%, more people who are aged, people with immune problems, people with diabetes, hypertension, they are the people who should be worried. So there is no need to panic in the first place, because if you are compliant with all our personal protective behavior, the infections will be less. If infections is less, our system will be able to handle it. There is no need to panic. How to decrease panic? We have to spread this positive message to everyone. One, and we should stop stigmatizing people who are infected. Cure or vaccine, sir? See, as such, there is no a perfect antiviral drug. If it was there, diseases like HIV, everything would have been treated already. So cure, whatever drugs which are there in the market, which we doctors are using in the ICUs, or remdesivir and other drugs which is coming here, they all decrease the viral load. Maybe when somebody asks the questions, I can throw more light on this. They decrease the viral load and decrease the severity. Ultimately, to remove the virus from our body, our own immune system is required to kill all the virus. So, but yes, there are drugs that decrease the severity, improve our outcomes, and which will help us. Vaccine, numerous trials are underway throughout the globe. A lot of secrecy is there. As of now, nobody has come up with a vaccine, but there are multiple attempts from different countries to come up with a vaccine. And what I hear from people, it is expected by this year end or early part of next year. So maybe what I can do is we can take questions and we can have a discussion.
Yeah. Doctor, thank you for a very nice summary. This is Dipankar again. There are questions already and people have But before that, I just want one quick question from you. See, one is of course the rate of infection, and we are seeing that already in many places like Delhi and Mumbai. The healthcare system is already sort of choked in many ways. We are hearing this, people are not getting admission and no ventilator. Now, if we have a peak which is even higher than this, which may still be much lower than 80 lakhs or whatever, but if this 10 lakhs become 20 lakhs, what are the ways people or the government or medical community is thinking of managing those sort of exigency, which may be more severe than what it is today? So that will be my question, and then we can go to other questions.
Okay. So to answer that question, sir, actually the government is actually working on the question which you are asking. That is, they're working on that from day one, because that is all the work of the government. That is the government's focus now. Basically, what I'm trying to say is 90% of infections are going to be mild. They will not need hospitalization. Okay. So let us say, I will give you a simple case example of Karnataka. We are expecting 2 lakh cases. All our estimations, which were as a figure for 2 lakh cases, we don't have to make beds available for 2 lakh cases. We have to make beds available only for less than 10%. So let us say you have to make 20,000. We have to plan treatment. That is 20,000 people are likely to get symptoms. Out of this 20,000, around 4 to 6,000 may need hospitalization. And out of that, very few people will die. So the first point of your question is, if large number of people are going to get infected, will our system be able to handle that? Every state is having an exigency plan or a plan to create spaces within the public sector and the private sector. It will be interesting for you to know that almost the health sector is working totally in controlling COVID. I know to what extent they are working, it is not visible to all. But whatever beds are available in public health system may not be able to cater to everybody who will require hospitalization. That is why they have approached the private sector to give beds, to reserve beds, so that people who are requiring care will be sent to the beds in the private hospital if they can afford it. If the person is referring from the government system, the government will take care of the expenses. Directly you can walk into a private hospital, you are going to pay the expenses on this year. So every state at a district level, they have made estimations. For district A, every district has been given a target. So you have to establish 3,000 beds. You have to identify 2,000 beds. And this target is based on calculation of expected number of cases. And this is exactly the Karnataka state government is doing a district level preparedness and progress assessment, where there's in every district, in every meeting, all our senior government officials are taking a stock of the availability of the beds. One. Second thing, let us assume that we have done our best, both public, private, everybody, they have done the battery coming. We have done our best, but still, just a minute. So we have done our best, but still there are no beds. So what, in the worst case scenario, you can take care at your homes itself. Worst, I'm saying, if it goes very bad, like in Spain or Italy, there'll be no, we have to shift people with mild cases or people without any symptoms but who are tested positive into large centers called as COVID care centers. Now, currently government is identifying COVID care centers throughout the district and state. COVID care centers are not hospitals. They are basically places where all the positives will be kept, and only thing that will be done is they'll be monitored for their temperature and oxygen saturation at regular intervals, such that if any person deteriorates, God forbid, they'll be shifted to a hospital. So there are contingency plans in place at a district level. See, I can speak mostly of Karnataka, but I'm sure most of the districts, they work on central guidelines, and I don't expect the things to be different from state to state. So every district has a contingency plan on how to manage exigency, or what we call increase in cases. So yes, there will be an issue with beds, but we have to come up with solutions for that. Yes. If anybody wants to ask anything?
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. We'll then take questions. What I'll request is anybody who has a question may raise the hand and then unmute yourself and make the question. And there are a couple of questions also on the chat box, which I'll come back later. Yeah, we can come back later. Yeah. So I think Mr. Srinivas wants to ask a question. Yeah.
Yes,
so first of all, thank you so much for your valuable time, sir. It's rather important to listen to professionals, and a lot of this is going in the social media. So I should really thank you and Deepanka for getting the session on. So my question is two things. I somehow feel that people have become a bit more lethargic after the news of the drugs available in the market has come. So I could see a clear difference what was 2 weeks back and probably 4 weeks back. So some light on that one. And the difference between a drug and a vaccine would be even more helpful. And my third question is, beyond COVID, this pandemic has caused a lot of mental stress and mental ill health across the globe. So some insights on that will be of great use, because I see there is more a social order problem coming in numbers than actually direct COVID. So probably if you can throw light on that, it will be of very great help. Thank you, sir.
Just before that, I have this thing. I'm Brigadier Sandeep Kumar. Whoever is speaking is requested to tell the name and then follow it up. Thank you.
My apologies, sir. I'm Srinivas Ramachandran from Belatur, Kadagudi, Whitefield.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you are muted, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Gautam, you are muted. You have to unmute yourself.
So the first question with respect to lethargy or so after the lockdown, there has been an unlock. So more than lethargy, people are busy in trying to re-establish their daily bread, daily living, social obligations, commitments. So people are busy in that. So more than being lethargic to the drugs, people are busy in re-establishing their lives. So there are two things here. One is life and livelihood. Both are important. So people are busy with that. And once the government says that, yeah, it's time to unlock, and simply government will not say that it's time to unlock, because we must have achieved some amount of preparedness and some amount of decrease in number of cases. So to say whether people have become lethargic, as of now, there are no studies to exactly say. And I really feel that linking this lethargy with the drugs, if that is there in the mind, please remove it. But as I told earlier, there is no drug to cure COVID-19. What is happening, if I can briefly explain, COVID virus, it enters, attaches to receptors, ACE receptors in the lungs, and then it multiplies, and various things happen, scientific things where there's clogging of blood vessels in the brain, in the lungs, and then there's a disseminated coagulation. All those things happen, and the patient finds the saturation will fall and he will die. Now, what are these drugs doing? And most of these COVID drugs, they're also used earlier for treating HIV and so many related viral conditions. So these drugs, they decrease the severity of disease by decreasing the amount of virus to attach. So that decreasing but once the virus enters inside the bloodstream and inside the cells, it will not be able to kill every virus. So only our own immunity is of two types. One by our antibodies that can kill these agents. Second type of immunity is the cell-mediated immunity, where we have natural killer cells that go and attack and kill these virus. So only that can actually kill the virus. Our drugs, antiviral drugs, only decrease the amount of virus and hereby reduce the severity. Basically, they also help to kill, but not directly. They kill some and stimulate our system to kill more. So basically they will help in the process, but by themselves they will not be able to remove it totally. That's for sure. So that is with respect to drugs. What was the other thing about a difference between a drug and a vaccine? So a vaccine is something that prevents the attachment of the virus. So the meaning of the word infection is the entry of virus into the human body, multiplication, and to an extent where we individuals mount an immune response. So all the three things should happen to call it an infection. That is entry, stimulation by multiplication, the body gets stimulated and starts producing immunity against the virus. So all the three things should happen. If all these three happen, then we call it as an infection. So vaccine is something that prevents infection. When we take oral polio, 2 drops, when a child is given oral polio, there is immunity at the stomach and immunity in the bloodstream also. So whenever a new polio virus enters the body of the child, it cannot latch on to the child. Okay, maybe I can get little academic here. Just every infectious disease or every virus or bacteria has to undergo the following phases. That is, there is a route of entry which is specific for every agent. After entry, there is a site of localization. For COVID, it is the respiratory system. After site of localization, there is a site of multiplication. Here it's the respiratory system and the blood and all the immune cells. Okay. After site of multiplication, there should be a route of exit. Here by coughing. Then there should be one more susceptible person. So this complete cycle is what we in epidemiology call as successful parasitism. So infection, vaccine is something that prevents the site of localization and multiplication. Basically, it prevents the virus from entering establishing inside our body. That is the meaning of vaccine. Drug is something, the agent has already have the route of entry. It is already having a site of localization. It has started multiplying. Now, when you give a drug, what it does, it starts killing the virus. So drug acts after the virus has entered and started multiplying in the body. Vaccine acts by preventing the entry of virus into the body. So this is the major scientific difference between a vaccine and a drug. So mental stress, yes, that is basically what is happening in most of the people who are getting admitted. You see people are either hanging themselves or running away and those kind of things. Yes, it is clearly a mental stress. That's mainly because even if it is not for COVID, if I'm just people who are already in containment zones may have experienced it. Staying alone at home, like we are in lockdown, we have experienced it. Staying alone at home itself is little stressing without going out anywhere. It's basically your own prison, okay? And you are living in that prison with another fear that you are going to be infected. So that is a mental stress. Added to that, there is stress that you are not able to perform tasks or obligations, social obligations, financial obligations, domestic obligations, and suddenly you have been put in this situation. So even that adds to the stress. It's not only about the COVID. What we have seen is, it is the fear of infection, it is the fear of death, it is always being helpless about not being able to complete what started, financial problems, social problems, all these things together combine and the reasons for this mental stress. Now what can be done? Sir, you need to speak out. So for the patients who are admitted here, psychiatrists, psychologists, they call them over the phone and do telecounseling. The government is doing telecounseling through the district mental health program. And you don't need to be a professional counselor. Even for the people who are affected, even if the RWA nominates some 2-3 people who can just call them and speak to them, I think that will help them to reduce their mental stress. More importantly, they are having mental stress because of that they believe they have the infection, they're going to die. So a positive communication, a reinforcement regularly to these patients will surely help in decreasing their amount of mental stress. That message needs to go that if you get COVID, it's not a death sentence. It's not a death sentence at all. Hardly 100+ people have died. I mean, I shouldn't be speaking like this, but still, I want nobody to die. But if you consider the population of Bangalore is 1 crore, more people, the chance of getting COVID is even lesser than chance of you getting an accident on the road when you're driving. So that message has to be sent clearly to people. So that could, maybe you people can reflect on what I told.
Thank you, doctor. Maybe we can, if anybody has any question, we can take it, or you can take the question from Mr. Vijay Otekar in the chat. If you can see it, or should I read it for you?
No, I have it here. What one must do if he or she is diagnosed with COVID? Question is with respect to medical treatment. So as soon as you are, now simply you are not going to get diagnosed with COVID. Now either you have gone to an hospital for some procedure, or you have come in contact with a person who is positive, or you have symptoms, fever, cough, cold, difficulty in breathing. So if you have one of these things, people will test you for COVID. Now if you are diagnosed to be COVID, it simply means that you have the virus inside you. That's all it means. It does not mean that you have the disease. So if you are diagnosed with COVID, the public health system will take over and they will admit you in a hospital. There are 2 types of hospitals now. Now it's 3 types. One is called as a dedicated COVID hospital, which in Bangalore is our Victoria Hospital and Boring Hospital. In district level, we call it as DCHC. It's called Dedicated COVID Health Center. And there are private hospitals. So if you go to the public health system, probably you will be put up in a COVID care center if you don't have any symptoms. So they will not give any treatment also to you. You don't need any treatment. So they will just give you some medicines to decrease your fever. They will monitor your pulse. They will monitor your respiratory rate. They will monitor your oxygen saturation. Only if you get it decreases, then you will be shifted to COVID hospital. If you go to private hospital, also the same thing they will do. So if you are diagnosed with COVID, you will invariably be taken to either a COVID care center or a private hospital or a COVID hospital, depending on how severe is your symptoms. So now you can actually go to a private hospital as well directly, and you don't have to worry, because the moment your sample is tested positive, information will be floated around that there is a person who's tested positive, and you will be contacted. So they will manage. So medical treatment, without symptoms, there's no treatment. Once you develop symptoms, the key here is two things. One, to what extent you have other comorbid conditions. Blood sugar is under control, blood pressure is not under control, whether your heart disease is worse, whether you have HIV/AIDS, whether you have. So basically, what are the other diseases you have? One. Second, how much is your oxygen saturation? How much is your respiratory rate? And they also do some tests for this immune markers. There is calcitonin levels, and then there are various other lab tests are done. So once they do all these lab tests, they will categorize the patient as A, B, and C. So there is clear-cut protocols on what needs to be done for a person who is having category A, what needs to be done for a category B, what needs to be done for a category C. And what needs to be done here is they are going to give you some drugs to decrease coagulation. So what we called as anticoagulants will be given. Steroids will be given to decrease the inflammation, because the main reason for death is the inflammation that happens in the lungs and within the blood vessels that supply blood to the lungs. They are going to give you steroids. They are going to give you antibiotics to prevent secondary infections. They are going to give you antiviral drugs. As you have seen in the paper nowadays, there are various. So there's a clear-cut protocol. Category A, what kind of drugs to be given for how many days, which antiviral to be given. So there it will be strictly followed. So if you get COVID, if you don't have any symptoms, no treatment. If you have symptoms, you will be assessed on what category of treatment will be required, and that category of treatment will be provided you in the hospital wherever you get admitted. So that's all can be done. They will do that, and they will monitor you. In case you're responding well, you will be discharged. If you're not responding well, your respiratory failure will happen, and you will ultimately go to ventilator. This is the treatment modality currently followed now.
Thank you very much, doctor. That helps.
So
yeah, is anybody having any question which is not on the chat window? You can ask, unmute yourself and ask.
I just look at questions which are related to medical treatment. So
sure.
Does Sandeep, to everyone, does it affect only respiratory system or it affects other system too? Sir, yes, it can affect their entire body. See, basically, initially it starts as a viral infection that affects the respiratory system. But subsequently it becomes a systemic disease because it affects your, it can spread, it can cause a whole lot of things. People have reported cardiac problems, stroke related problems. So various things are there. It can affect a whole lot of things, but predominantly and more it's a respiratory infection and pneumonia that leads to what you call a shock, disseminated intravascular coagulation, and shock it leads. Anything with respect to medical treatment, let me just have a look.
Yeah, I think the next one also is that is it inevitable that there has to be 100% infection, which I think you said no, right?
Which one? 100%?
Yeah, means everybody will get affected at some time. Is it
Sorry. For example, Sweden is a country that has not followed any social distancing. There was no lockdown, nothing. So there, they have believed on the classical model. Initially, when all the countries around the world were having some lockdowns, there was nothing happening in Sweden. So they just allowed the virus to spread. So there they relied on the balance of susceptibles versus what you call the immune people. Here, I totally disagree that everybody will get infected. because suppose we were not doing anything like social distancing or wearing masks. Since you're doing, so let me give a simple example, sir. Let us say I am COVID positive and Lingaraj sir is COVID negative. If we both are talking to each other for more than 15-20 minutes, basically, since I'm positive, whenever I'm talking, I'm throwing the virus out of my mouth. Normally, when you're talking, around 20 to 30 viral particles are thrown out, okay, every minute. So, if me and Lingaraj sir is working out in a gym together, so from 20 viral particles, I'm throwing out 20,000 to 2 lakh. You see the amplification that happens, okay. And the more time he spends with me, the more chances that he is going to get infected. Now, suppose I am wearing a mask, I am the person who is affected and I am wearing a mask, the chance of the other person, even if he is spending some amount of time with me, drops drastically to less than 30%. Suppose he is also wearing a mask, I am also wearing a mask, the chance of infection drops down to less than 1%, 1 to 1.5. That is why they are saying avoid crowds. Whenever you go outside, stay 2 meters away from a person, wear mask. Because even if I have the infection, you are unlikely to get, because the amount, even if you get, let us say, even if you get infected with a mask, now infection, or as I told earlier, is how much virus enters your body and how much it starts multiplying. Now the amount of virus that enters your body, if you're following all your mask and yet all those things, will be maybe 20, 30, 40 virus, which our body's immune system will take care. In the same scenario, if I'm not wearing mask, the amount of virus that enters inside my body will run to 10,000s and lakhs. It should be difficult for my immune system to handle. So, since we are following that in India, I really don't think everybody will be infected. So, if all people are wearing masks, wherever cases are there, they are contained, the virus will die out naturally. That's all. So, so that is my answer to that. No, we notice awareness. In Tamil Nadu, positives are admitted only if they show severe symptoms. If symptoms are mild, they are sent to, sir, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka both are in different stages of epidemiology of disease. The case load in Karnataka is very low. Currently, we have the facilities to have hospital observation of people whoever is tested positive. Maybe if our cases also increase, then we will start admitting people only with symptoms. But why I'm saying, why the government is admitting people who are positives is, at least by taking him inside, they are ensuring that he is not going around anywhere. They are bringing them without symptoms in one place, and then just measuring his oxygen saturation, giving some medicines, so that he is not spreading it around. If the situation increases so much, maybe we will have to request people who are positives, who are tested positive and who don't have symptoms. We say them, sir, please take treatment and stay inside your house. Currently, we have not come to that stage. If symptoms are mild, they are sent into home quarantine and monitored remotely. Yeah, we are still not in that stage. Our caseload is very, very less. Our such case handled in Karnataka. In Karnataka, we are sending everybody to hospital. Whoever is tested positive, they are either going to a COVID care center or a COVID hospital or a private hospital. Every positive is being sent to hospital. I think that covers the medical treatment. Any other questions, sir, on treatment?
Yeah, I think there was one more, which is that, even when people are traveling interstate, and maybe they are testing negative before starting, and they might be traveling in their own car without stopping, but still when they reach the destination, they have to go through a quarantine process.
Yes.
So is it because of the concern that they might have contracted on the way, or?
No, sir, what I will tell you is, now here there is a incubation period. People who are coming, most of the cases that are occurring in our state after unlock, more than 70% of the cases are not from here. There are people who are returning back to our state from other states. The migrants who are coming back, or basically the cases are not indigenous. They're coming from some other states surrounding our state. So if this is the situation, every person who is expected to enter, we assume that he is infected. We assume that is, especially is coming from a higher infections area, we assume that he is infected. Now the person, if he is tested negative, the person, if he is tested, your question was if he is tested negative, should he undergo quarantine?
Yeah, hi doctor, this is Surin here. I had raised this question. I'm from Professor Silvana. Yeah, so the individual had done a testing before they started their travel, and it was negative. And they were asymptomatic. So do they still have to go through the home quarantine process? Was my question.
Yeah, yes, sir. They have to, because, sir, now, to have a ICMR approved COVID negative test certificate is allowed only for a few people who are working in the field of COVID control, some bureaucrats or people who are coming for some emergencies. For people who are coming for some emergencies, they give a declaration that they are going to be only for 2 days, and then, so these are the people who are exempted from quarantine. Otherwise, even if you are tested negative, you are negative when you got your result. Sorry, you are negative when you gave the sample, sir. You are negative. What does the test report says? It says you are COVID negative, but at what date? At the date you gave the sample. Now, it takes around 1 to 2 days for you to get the report. And even during the course of travel, you could be infected. You could get infected even in that state border receiving area, where I observe that most of the people spend around 10 to 15 minutes there. They have to get out of the car, they have to go there, they have to register themselves in the Seva Sindhu application, get stamped and come. You can get infected anywhere. So quarantine is necessary, but since your chances are low, you are quarantined at home. You stay at home. You stay at home. So quarantine, I feel, is necessary. And that's exactly what is being done as well now. So people who are coming into the state, depending on where they are coming from, they are either sent to institutional quarantine or home quarantine. If you're coming from Kerala, you just cross the border, you go to your home, and you are home quarantine for 14 days. So for Tamil Nadu, there's a different rule. For Maharashtra, there's a different rule. Yes, even if you are having a COVID negative certificate, unless you come here for a COVID control related work, or a politician who's come for some very emergency meeting, or somebody has expired and you're given a declaration that you come here and you're going to be there within less than 2 days and going back. You come here for a very important business meeting and you're going to go back in 2 days. These are all the conditions only in which you are exempted from quarantine. Otherwise, everyone who enters the state will have to be quarantined either at institute or at home.
Thanks, Doctor.
Yes, sir.
Doctor, thank you so much. This is Deepankar again. I think we have almost reached the time. So since there are no more questions, no more
chat questions.
Deepankar, I have Srini again here. I have one last question.
Okay.
So is there any best practices in terms of consumption, your food pattern or lifestyle pattern, which could help this in specific?
Sir, basically it is immunity has to be improved, and immunity improves by consuming good fruits, vegetables, exercise, low stress. These are the things that will help to improve our immunity. So exercise daily, consume lots of fruits and vegetables, your immunity will improve, and that can help you to counter. Why are we thinking about going so far, sir? If you just follow social distancing, wear masks, and have good surveillance system in apartments, more than enough. Even today, the transmission in apartment is low. Even today, the transmission in apartment is low because of all the good things we have done till this time. Only thing, surveillance has not been done to a great extent, but indirectly it has happened because through the security or through your neighbors, some amount of surveillance is happening. We just continue that, it should be more than enough. What
Deepankar, do we have time for one last question?
Does it affect other respiratory system in the?
Is there any restriction in time? I have 2 questions.
I have one question. This is Devi Prasad.
Sir, Lingaraj, sir, we notice awareness in rural areas is very low. Government is not, sir, awareness in rural areas is low. Maybe in some areas it's very high, in some areas it's low, but infection actually is not yet reached the rural areas to a great extent now. But God forbid, if that happens, it's going to be a disaster. Currently, it's more or less in people who are coming from outside and in the urban areas more.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of questions. Maybe quickly, we have only blocked 1 hour from the doctor's time. He is obviously
no problem,
very
sir.
busy.
No problem.
Quickly we'll ask. Quickly we'll ask.
Yeah,
No issues, sir.
So, doctor, this is Devi Prasad. My question is, see, as per Government of India, they have also kind of notified about certain Ayurvedic / homeopathic possibilities, as precaution, medicines, right? So, as a doctor, what do you recommend? See, Ayurvedic medications, there are some concoctions which have been, the concoctions have been floating around in the internet. And in terms of homeopathy, there are homeopathic doctors who are talking about some arsenic album and things like that, which boosts the immunity. But what has been your experience on this?
No, sir, I don't think I can actually answer that because no, we have not actually assessed anything to say that if you take arsenic or maybe a person who's doing expert in Ayurveda can answer. But if you ask me, if it is not going to harm us, there's nothing wrong in taking it. I mean, if it's not having any side effects, there's nothing wrong in taking it. But I really don't have any evidence to say that it really works, that Ayurvedic medicines, if you take, or arsenic, if you take, it's going to improve our immunity. Immunity is improved by good food, rest, and exercise. That is always there. Now, there's one more question. How risky it is to travel by air? And it is okay for senior citizens to take the air travel. According to me, senior citizens should stay at home now. Senior citizens, if it's really necessary, only emergency situations, they can travel. Otherwise, they have to weather it out. Stay at home until cases decrease. Even if they are expected to travel, follow all PPE precautions. Wear a mask, gloves, even if required, face shields, and then go. Air travel, the airlines claim that they follow all precautions. If they actually followed it in word and spirit, the risk could be less. It all depends on how well the crowd is managed at that point in time, whichever airport you are going. Does one get a relapse? Sir, we don't call it as a relapse. It's basically a reinfection, if at all it happens. So the meaning of the word relapse is the virus doesn't go away. It stays in our body hidden somewhere. After some time there's no such thing as relapse. Reinfection is reported in some parts of China and in the US also. But that proportion is less. Do you think there will be a day when things would completely normalize? 100% sure. Or our lives are permanently changed? No, sir. There are thousands of viruses. There are many viruses will come, many viruses will go. So things should become. It will become normal afterwards. It will take time, but the government may, or the doctors, or everybody will declare that okay, now it's not a big risk. But thing is, as citizens, you people have lived in this lifestyle for 6 months, and behavior is not so easy to change. So it will take some time for this to wean off. I mean, like what I'm trying to say is, from December, will nobody wear mask and walk in the street? So even if I say don't wear mask and walk, still you may wear mask and walk because it will not change so fast. So, but things would come completely normal. Yes, it has happened before. The Spanish flu, so many other pandemics have happened earlier. People will weather it out and things will become normal. What is the time duration from the first symptom to total recovery? It's patient to patient, roughly around 7 to 14 days, 1 week. Usually what they say is, what currently guidelines is 10 days is the time taken to decide on discharge. So less than 10 days. But the issue is, even after recovery, for some amount of time, symptoms may go away totally. Why they are keeping people in hospital is that our government is very clear that they are going to discharge only if there is a COVID negative test. So I may not have symptoms at all, but they are waiting for me to test negative. So then only they are releasing me into the population. So that for the virus to totally stop going away from our body, it's varying between 3 days to as far as 3 weeks. That is why some people are spending more time in hospitals. When vaccination is ready, in how much time do you think it would be available for people? This is an issue of supply, logistics, and those kind of things. But I don't think it will take too much time. If vaccine is available, now it's all, there are experts, engineers, and who will manufacture it at a faster rate, and it will be available to everyone very fast.
Okay,
What is the...
okay, now that...
Oh, sir, you're telling something. What is the vulnerability in handling daily supplies like milk, fruits, and vegetables? Sir, it is low risk. That is the assumption which everybody have. Okay, vulnerability is there. I'm not saying it is not there. How much time do you spend more than 15 minutes within 1 meter with a milkman to take the milk? No. So even if you get infected, the amount of virus that will go inside your body is maybe 5, 10, 20 viral particles. Your immune system will manage it. The issue is, even though the risk is there, the risk is less. So you don't have to be too much worried about that. Yes, if you're handling supplies like, see, suppose you're going to a grocery store, make it, if it is open, I mean, in the sense there is no AC or there is well ventilated, go soon, finish your job and come back. So if there is more crowd, you go at times when crowd is not there. Once you go inside, don't try to spend too much time inside. See, as I told you, there are two things here. One is the duration. The duration of exposure is directly proportional to the amount of virus that enters you. Assuming that you are not following masks, not following social distancing. So you should, our behavior should be such, we should be able to make a personal judgment of the situation. Don't spend too much time, go there, finish the work and come out. Before you do, wash your hands with sanitizer. If at all, if anything is there, it will die. The chances of transfer to these substances is very much lesser when compared to the airborne transmission. Vulnerability is less. Possibly infected. When according to will COVID-19 be removed and life back to normal? Maybe by October to December, between that time.
Sir, my name is Chinmay. I have one question. Sir, when the people, there is no symptoms, so when should we think that we should go for any test or something like that? So
no, you don't have to be tested if you're not having symptoms. Sir, who are being tested now? You will be asked to undergo a COVID test only if you are a primary or secondary contact of a positive patient, or you are admitted in hospital to undergo some surgery or some procedure, or you are entering our state from some other state. These are the only 3 conditions in which you will undergo testing. So if you are asymptomatic, there is no need for you to go tested. Go get a testing.
Okay, sir.
Okay, I am Brigadier Sandeep. I have a question. Sir. I have 3 questions, in fact. The first question is regarding the virus itself. There are a lot of things happening, saying that virus has come from China and all those things. I just wanted to do this thing. Is it a existing virus or is it a lab-made thing, and how it is going to affect the actual effect on patients? That's very important.
Nobody knows that, sir. Whether it's a lab-made virus or see, coronavirus has been there.
Because you're muted.
Sir, coronavirus has been there. It's not a new. It's not a new virus. It's a it's a new mutated virus basically. And to say whether this mutation has happened naturally, because see sir, they are all zoonotic diseases. So they have these domestic, they have a wildlife cycles. Now automatically by our interference, what virus is moving around in the wildlife has entered us here. I mean in the wildlife cycle. Now to say to answer your question whether this change has happened in the lab or in the natural environment, I really don't know. I mean nobody knows. Only the people where it emerged may know. Then second question you asked was, will we...
No, the second question is regarding sanitization. Because you know when the thing started coming, there are a lot of methods of sanitization which was professed by a lot of people, and use of sodium hypochlorite and various other things. What is the effect of the sanitization, and what should be the frequency of that? Because since it is airborne, like you said, it is going to be airborne. How effective it will be, and what is the or is it not going to be effective? These things are not very clear.
If you ask me, everything has got a cost effectiveness analysis. Now, if you want to put up a sanitization machine at the entrance, somebody started it, everybody used it, but are you seeing it anywhere nowadays?
No.
No. So that answers the question one. So the main reason why I'm saying is, for a disease which is airborne in route of transmission, what is the point of you spraying a lot of chemicals on the body of that person, on the clothes of that person, where the vulnerability is lesser? So it really doesn't make a proper scientific thing. Because, so let us say you sanitize me totally and I enter inside the room and cough. There's no point, right? So it's not really useful unless and until you are taking a medical history of that person, travel history of that person, checking the temperature of that person, checking the saturation of that person, and then allowing him inside. So here now what has happened, apart from sanitization, you're also asking is probable exposure risk.
Yeah.
So that may be a combination of that would be useful. Doing sanitization alone may not be useful.
Okay, when I said sanitization, the area sanitization also, since you told the sanitization of the personnel.
Okay. Oh, you're talking about area. Sir, area sanitization, what is happening? It is being done only in sealed in containment zones where there is clustering of cases, because the spread can also happen by the virus being on the ground, people touching it and all those kind of things. Even though the risk is lesser, it can happen. So what they do is they are spraying sodium hypochlorite so that if at all it is there, the virus will get killed. Even if they don't spray, by the action of sunlight, it will die in another 7 days, depending on where it is. 3 to 7 days, 3 to 14 days, it will die. But by spraying that, they are killing the virus, and it's a well-known strategy worldwide that is followed.
So the spraying in the lifts and all those things are happening. That's another thing which requires, because
sir, simply spraying in the lifts. So let us say what I'm trying to say is, in the lifts, where is the point of contact? Is the buttons and the rods and the railings. Okay, there you clean with sodium hypochlorite solution. Okay. Now, suppose in that block there is a positive case. So then I expect that, okay, then there is a little higher risk than normal that is existing everywhere. In those conditions, you can undertake 1 or 2 rounds of spraying, not more than that. Okay, because already the people who is infected will have been contaminated. So he is no longer roaming around now. Okay, only their primary contacts also would have been contained somewhere. They also will not be roaming around. So assuming that they were roaming around and they have coughed and the virus could be in one of the surfaces in the lifts, in such situation you can sanitize once and leave it. There is no point in spraying on the lift daily.
Thank you. That ends my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I see Mr. Subhash Bharnekar has raised his hand. Is there a question?
No, sir, I've already asked the question through chat.
You asked the question. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think there is no raised hand and there is no question, Doctor. Then I think we can conclude. Doctor, you're okay? You want to leave any final?
Yes. Basically, what I want to use this forum to communicate 2-3 things. I'll be very quick on that. One, I want to congratulate you all for doing such good work, especially Lingaraj sir, Shanti madam, and Srinivas sir, everyone who have taken this initiative on the behalf of FORCE-GW. That is the first message. Second message is, you should step up surveillance, whatever, in however way you do it. Third message is, please educate everyone, whomever you meet, that it's not a situation to panic. It will create unnecessary stigma. It will create unnecessary problem for you and for the healthcare workers, for the police and everyone. So we don't need a stigma or a panic at this time. It's basically just to be cautious, that's all. So if every one of you spread the message, then I think things should be fine.
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor. I will, of course, request Lingaraj to make a formal thanks note. But, you know, to sum up, I think what you fundamentally said is 3 or 4 things, if I may have to take. One is that it's very comforting to know that the situation in Karnataka and Bangalore in particular is very comfortable at this point of time in terms of facilities available, the beds available, the ventilator availability. Second is, there is a very robust and detailed plan which has been done, which may not be visible to us, to tackle the situation, including the sort of exigency which you talked about, you know, the increase of cases you mentioned, you know, we can possibly have up to 200,000 you know, cases, and that also should be comfortably managed. Third,
sir, just a minute, sorry. 200,000 is like a very, very high estimate. Very high estimate on which the government is working.
Right. Okay. Okay. So fair enough. But you know, we get the comfort. Third, the takeaway is, you know, for us, we have to continue to take the basic steps like social distancing, wearing the mask, you know, sanitation at the personal level, and of course, you know, the travel restrictions, especially for the aged and the vulnerable. And if we can do that, probably a significant, maybe even 99% of the risk will be eliminated. So we should continue to do that. And fourth is, we should become ambassadors. You know, people who like us, who are aware and are possibly much more aware today, should become active ambassadors for others to understand that, you know, that it is not as scary as it looks, because the fatality rate is, you know, as you gave examples in terms of percentage or absolute number, as well as the facility that is available, the preparedness and the outlook which we have. And so thank you. Thanks so much from my side. I will request Lingaraj to give a formal note. Lingaraj, are you there? Yes. Okay. You can put on your video.
Yeah, I'm very much here.
We want to see you, not just your iPhone. Put on your video, please.
Okay, there you go. I told you I don't have my makeup on, but anyway, doctor, really appreciate your time.
No problem, sir.
It is so comforting I know I've been speaking to you and I speak to you quite often, and we exchange notes and ideas and thoughts. But for our community leaders to also interact with you and get first-hand information and knowledge on all the initiatives which you are taking, NIMHANS is taking, and through you and through your wider experience and that of NIMHANS, the state government is taking. I'm sure it brings a lot of comfort and assurance and confidence to all the community leaders who have also taken time to participate in this discussion. Your message is very clear. Adhere to personal protection. Simply, wearing masks, social distance, sanitizing. I think these are the 3 main important things which we have to do when it comes to personal protection. The second thing is, build immunity. Eat good food, vegetables and fruits. And to that extent, I'm very happy to say that FORCE-GW has been enabling, even supply of fruits and vegetables, to our communities, especially in the area from Mandur to Kadagodi, to make sure that with two objectives. One is to help the farmers sell their produce, and also our communities to get fruits and vegetables seamlessly and easily at good rates and prices. So, and also of good quality. So in a way, we are also helping communities to build immunity that way. And the third most important thing, and I think this is a big reassurance to everybody, is the fact that the healthcare system of Karnataka is ready to cope with the kind of numbers that are expected. The worst case scenario numbers, which you mentioned, of 2 lakh cases, and of which about 10% will need hospitalization. So the healthcare system is ready to cope with that. And, that's very reassuring. And with these words, Doctor, really appreciate your time and for your candidness in responding to all the queries.
It's our duty,
we hope to have more such interactions as we, sort of find our way through this pandemic. And like you rightly said, there are many things which we as a generation have seen in our lifetime. But this is probably the most highly impactful thing where, if we see ourselves on the other side, we'll probably have a nice story to tell our grandchildren of how we countered and coped with this kind of a pandemic.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So thank you all. Thank you, Doctor. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I am closing the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.